In addition to cover crop and no tillage, are you interested to add diverse crop rotation? Yes, so we do have some questions in the survey that I believe will get at crop rotations, especially because we have yearly data, so we can look at how many different crops they have in their rotations. But in the survey questions that I quickly pulled out for this, it wasn't one of the ones that was how knowledgeable are you, I believe, but we do have that information. I just didn't want to overwhelm us today. So yeah, that's a great point, that's an important practice for soil health. The other question was, did you get their definition of soil health? So I think this would be referring to the survey. We did not ask for their definition of soil health. I kind of wish we would have now that I've seen the soil health nexus survey. We do have some fill in the blanks about different aspects about if they had any comments about the soil health responses. So we might be able to get some information from there. But that is one of the first things that I'm going to ask in my interviews that I'll be doing is how do they define soil health? Because we can't begin explaining what factors affect soil health unless we start out on how are we each defining it. So I think that's a really great point, but we didn't do it at the survey level. Let's see, if you add together minimum and no-till, I think you get over 50%. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, you're right. So in that way, we're doing really well in terms of promoting the use of reduced tillage in the state, or in these 4 states. So that's a really good point. I'd be curious to see how that breaks down by state. I haven't dug into that yet, but I know in some cases that differs, whether you're more central or the eastern states. That's a great point, thank you. Let's see. Did you ask if they were organic or conventional or a mix? I do not believe if we asked if they were organic or conventional, but we do ask about the use of different herbicides and pesticides, I believe. I'll have to go back. The survey was about 8 pages long, and I'll be honest that I've zoned in on the soil health questions right now, and we'll be figuring out how to break it apart later. But I don't think that we explicitly asked organic or conventional in this survey. I'm trying to navigate this chat box. Are you concerned about or controlling for survey bias, i.e. only farmers with soil health on their radar are answering? I think that that's a great question, but because we surveyed 2,000 farmers and the bulk of the survey wasn't about soil health, I don't think that that'll be the case, at least for the surveys. We actually, I think, have a pretty big breadth of farmers, and there were only about, I would say, like 6, maybe a quarter, not even, like less than a quarter of the questions were soil health. So most of this, I think, yeah, way less than that. So most of the survey wasn't about soil health, so I don't think we're biasing for farmers just on soil health, but that's a really great point. That's something that I've been thinking about for the interviews in terms of how we should split up and choose who we interview based on their bias for or against soil health, and that will likely affect what we see in their mental models. So I think that's a really great point to bring up. Can you add an economic question after will improve soil health, increase yields? So maybe this would refer to will improve soil, increase profit, or improve soil health, increase profit. I think that's a great question because yield doesn't necessarily mean profit depending on what you're doing to get that yield. And so you could have lower yield, but more profit because you didn't have to have as many inputs with healthy soil is where my brain goes to. I think that's a great point. We didn't have that on this survey. We do have some other surveys trying to, or some other questions trying to just differentiate if farmers are more environmentally conscious or more economically driven. So for instance, what are they valuing most in their farming? So maybe we can see if those different groups of farmers answer differently to get at that a little bit, but no, we didn't ask that explicitly, and that's a great question on a future survey. Are you addressing any federally funded conservation practices in your study? We did ask in the survey what % of their lands were in different conservation reserve programs, EQIP, and other federal and state conservation programs. So I think it'll be interesting to break out those farmers that are enrolled in more of those conservation practices if their responses about soil health differ. Did you ask about organic inputs like manure and compost beyond? Yes, we did ask about manure use on the survey. So that'll be interesting. And we also asked about reduced nitrogen inputs and seeing if that's in contrast to manure. So this is a massive survey that Sandy put together, and I couldn't present all of it here. But yeah, those are great things that I think will be interesting to compare. And finally, do you believe that using soil health principles will increase your potential profitability? Do you believe that using soil health principles will increase your potential profitability? I do. I think that soil health has a great capacity. I mean, it depends on how we define soil health, right? But I think that the idea of soil health is increased resilience and soil structure and soil biology. And there are so many benefits that could reduce the reliance on synthetic inputs. I think it'll take time. And I think that that's one of the difficult transitions we'll have to help farmers get through. But I do believe, and I've talked with farmers who are no longer using inputs because they've gotten their soil health to a point where they don't need to anymore. Have you asked about how they might assess soil health? So we did ask if they do a soil health assessment, but that's all it says. And so that's one thing that's kind of left me wondering, what does that mean? Or like you said, are they taking additional analyses, digging pits, counting earthworms? And we didn't do it in depth in the interview, or sorry, in the survey, but I'm hoping to get at that a little bit in the interview with, you know, asking, how did you, so you believe this increases soil health? How do you know that? How do you measure that? I think that that's something really important to get at, because we need to be discussing how to evaluate soil health in ways that farmers can easily do it on their field. It can't all be dependent on lab-based assays, because I think that's a hindrance to farmers doing it and evaluating it on their own fields. Will the survey data be available to the public after you analyze? I believe so. I think Sandy's on this call, and if she wants to jump in, she's more than welcome. But it's part of the long-term ecological research, and I think because of that, it does have to be, but it'll be a while before that's possible. Vicki, if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to look into that more. And did you ask how long would it take for our soil health to become profitable? That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, because I think that's a question that everyone's asking, right? That's a question that scientists don't know. We don't know how long it takes, and how long. What do you do in that intermediate time before soils are healthy? Because you can't keep doing the same thing. You have to let your soils rest, or you have to change the practices and be okay with maybe a dip in the yield if that's what's going to happen before they get to that point and become profitable. And that would be really interesting to get farmers' perspectives on that in terms of thinking about if they're willing to wait that time, and if not, how can we mediate that or help them wait out that time? That's a great question. We have another survey going out next year, so maybe we'll have to include some of these in the next year.